I stood near the back wall of the presentation room, holding a notepad I didn't need. 23 people filled the space. Investors from Grandstone Holdings, senior partners from our firm, and him, Dalton, the VP who'd arrived 6 months ago with a reputation built on deals he'd supposedly closed at his last place. He was talking about overseas operations. Specifically, how the target company's international divisions had hidden weaknesses that most analysts would miss. How the numbers looked healthy on the surface but revealed serious problems once you dug deeper. How restructuring their European and Asian branches before finalizing the acquisition would save millions. Every word coming out of his mouth was mine. Every insight, every number, every solution. The key, he said, tapping the projection behind him, is recognizing that their Brussels branch has been masking losses by shifting inventory between regions. Once you see the pattern, the whole structure falls apart. I'd found that pattern. 3 weeks into my analysis, at 2 a.m, cross-referencing their quarterly filings with customs declarations I'd requested from a contact I'd built over years of doing this kind of work. Not glamorous work, background work. The kind nobody notices until it's already changed everything. An investor raised her hand. This level of detail is impressive. How long did this analysis take? Dalton smiled, the kind of smile that made people trust him. About 3 months of intensive research. I wanted to be thorough. My pen pressed into the paper. I wasn't writing anything, just pressing. Another investor leaned forward. And you're confident about these projections? The savings you're promising? Absolutely, Dalton said. I stake my reputation on it. Your reputation, I thought, built on my work. The woman sitting closest to me whispered to her colleague, "He's good, really good." I wanted to laugh or scream. Instead, I stood there, perfectly still, watching him soak up admiration for work he couldn't have done if his life depended on it. Then he said it. Someone asked who'd helped with the research. A reasonable question. These things require teams. Everyone knows that. Dalton gestured vaguely in my direction. Oh, I had some administrative support. Pulling files, organizing data. My assistant helped with the basic legwork. Administrative support, basic legwork, assistant, just a secretary, really, he added, like he was being generous by mentioning me at all. She handles scheduling, keeps things running smoothly, but the strategic analysis, that's where real expertise comes in. The room didn't react. Why would they? To them, I was furniture. Useful furniture, maybe, but nothing worth noticing. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger. Anger would have been hot, impulsive. This was colder, clearer, the kind of clarity that comes when you finally see a situation exactly as it is. I'd spent 8 years at this firm, 8 years building relationships, learning how deals actually worked, developing instincts that most people with graduate degrees never acquired. I'd started young, right out of college, answering phones and managing calendars for Gregor, the partner who ran mergers and acquisitions back then. Gregor saw something in me early on, maybe because I asked questions, maybe because I actually read the briefings I was supposed to file, maybe because I started spotting inconsistencies in proposals before the analysts did. You've got a brain for this, he'd told me once, late on a Thursday night when we were preparing for a huge negotiation. Most people see numbers. You see what the numbers are hiding. He'd started pulling me into meetings, not as a participant, but as an observer. Watch their faces when we mention valuation, he'd whisper. See how the CFO just tensed up? That number scares him, which means it's probably accurate. I learned more in those quiet observations than I ever could have in any classroom. How to read people, how to track patterns, how to know when someone was lying about their company's health, how to find the truth buried in hundreds of pages of financial statements. Gregor got promoted 18 months ago, moved to head the entire division. I was happy for him. He deserved it. Then Dalton arrived. You're going to love working with him, Gregor had said, introducing us. Dalton closed the Beaumont deal at his last firm. Really sharp. Dalton had smiled at me that same trust-building smile. I'm sure we'll work great together. I believe in strong teams. Strong teams. Right. The first month was fine. Normal. I managed his schedule, handled his calls, prepared briefings for his meetings. Standard work. Then he started asking me questions. Small ones at first. What do you think of this valuation? Or, Does this timeline seem realistic to you? I answered honestly, pointed out potential problems, suggested alternatives. It felt good, actually, like maybe he valued my input. By the second month, the questions got bigger. Walk me through how Gregor used to approach these deals. What was his process? I explained. The research methods, the relationship building, the way Gregor always insisted on verifying information through multiple sources before trusting it. Smart, Dalton had said. I knew there was a reason this firm had such a good track record. Month 3, he handed me the Grandstone acquisition. I need deep background on this. Everything you can find. Their operations, their finances, their people. Can you handle that? Can I handle that? I'd been handling that kind of work for years, just never with my name attached to it. Of course, I'd said. I dove in, spent nights rebuilding their financial models from scratch, because the ones they'd provided didn't match their public filings. Found connections between their subsidiaries that explained some unusual transactions. Discovered that their fastest-growing division was actually hemorrhaging money through a complex structure that shifted losses between countries. The Brussels inventory scheme, the Asian branch inflation, the European restructuring opportunity, all of it, every piece. I wrote it up, clearly, thoroughly, handed it to Dalton with a full breakdown of what I'd found and what it meant. This is excellent work, he'd said, barely glancing at it. Really excellent. I'll take it from here. I'd felt proud, useful, like I was contributing to something important. Then came the presentation. Today, right now, with him standing up there claiming everything I'd discovered as his own brilliant strategy. Just a secretary. The meeting wrapped up. Investors shook Dalton's hand, congratulated him. One of them mentioned bringing him in on another deal they were considering. I'd be honored, Dalton said. This is what I do, finding the truth in the numbers. Finding the truth in the numbers. My phrase. I'd said that exact thing to him 6 weeks ago when explaining how I'd uncovered the Brussels scheme. I walked back to my workspace. Not fled, not stormed off, just walked, purposefully, like I had work to do. Because I did have work to do. My name is Iris, and I just decided that being underestimated was about to become the most expensive mistake of Dalton's life. I sat down and opened my personal laptop, the one I used for correspondence that wasn't company business. 2 weeks earlier, I'd received a message through a professional networking site from Keller Briggs, CEO of Grandstone Holdings. The company Dalton was currently charming in the other room. The message had been brief. Someone suggested I reach out to you. Dalton and I worked together years ago. Before we finalize anything, I wanted to get your perspective on him. Off the record, I value honest opinions. I'd responded professionally, carefully, mentioned that I supported merger preparation work, didn't say much else. It wasn't my place to comment on my superior, and I genuinely believed at that point that Dalton and I were working together. Now, sitting at my workspace, while he probably scheduled celebration drinks in the other room, I opened a new message to Keller. Before I continue further, I need to say thank you to everyone who's been listening so far. Your support means everything. It's what keeps these stories going. If you're finding this worth your time, I appreciate you being here. Now, back to the story. I started typing. Mr. Briggs, I hope this message finds you well. I need to bring something important to your attention regarding the analysis presented today. The financial projections you received contain significant inaccuracies. Specifically, the liability calculations for the overseas subsidiaries are incorrect. The Brussels branch isn't just masking losses through inventory shifts. There are additional unreported obligations that weren't included in today's presentation. The risk exposure is substantially higher than what was discussed. I paused. Reread it. This wasn't emotion. This wasn't spite. This was information he needed to know. Information that could save his company from a disastrous acquisition. I continued. I'm attaching my original analysis, the complete version. You'll notice discrepancies between what I found and what was presented today. I believe your legal team should verify these findings independently before any agreements are finalized. The numbers matter, and these numbers are wrong. I attached my files, the real ones, the detailed breakdowns I'd spent 3 months creating, the ones that showed not just problems, but the actual depth of those problems, the ones Dalton had taken and then softened, made prettier, made more appealing to investors who wanted to hear good news. My finger hovered over the send button. This would end the deal. Absolutely end it. $2 billion of negotiations, gone. Dalton's reputation, destroyed. Possibly my job, finished. But here's what I knew that Dalton didn't. I understood the actual numbers, the real situation. And if Grandstone went through with this acquisition based on the fantasy version Dalton had presented, they'd lose far more than $2 billion. They'd lose everything. Keller deserved the truth, even if that truth burned everything else down. I clicked send, closed my laptop, went back to organizing files like nothing had happened, because that's what secretaries do, right? We organize files, handle administrative tasks, keep things running smoothly, while the real experts do the important work. 32 minutes passed. I know, because I counted them. Then Dalton's phone started buzzing. He looked at it, frowned, rejected the call. The buzzing stopped for maybe 10 seconds, then started again. Same number. This time he answered, stood up from his workspace, walked toward the windows. I couldn't hear his words, but I could see his posture. Straight at first, confident, then gradually bending, shoulders curving inward like he was trying to make himself smaller. The call lasted 4 minutes. When he hung up, he stared at his phone like it had just bitten him. Then it rang again. Different number. He answered immediately. Yes, I can explain. There must be some misunderstanding. No, I had the files reviewed by our entire team. What discrepancies? He went silent, listening. His free hand came up to his forehead, pressed against it. I need to pull the original research, he said finally. Give me 20 minutes. I'll send everything over. He hung up, stood there for a moment, then turned and walked straight toward Gregor's workspace. I kept organizing files. Alphabetical order. Very important work. 10 minutes later, both of them came out. Gregor looked puzzled. Dalton looked like someone had just told him his house was on fire. Iris, Gregor said, can you pull all the research materials for the Grandstone project? Everything. Original sources, your notes, all of it. Of course, I said. Calm. Professional. When do you need it? Now, Dalton said. His voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. Right now. Okay. I opened my filing system, started pulling folders, took my time. Not slow enough to be obstinate, but not rushing either. Just thorough. The way good assistants are thorough. I handed Gregor a stack of materials. My original analysis, the raw data, the sources I'd used, everything I'd given Dalton 3 weeks ago. Gregor flipped through the first few pages. His expression shifted. This is detailed, really detailed. Iris is very thorough, Dalton said quickly. She helped gather the background information. Helped gather? Gregor looked up. Iris, did you write this analysis? I met his gaze. I compiled the research Mr. Dalton requested. He asked me to dig into their overseas operations, find any weaknesses or concerns. That's what I found. And the Brussels inventory scheme? The liability calculations? Those came from cross-referencing their quarterly filings with import declarations, I said. Took about a week to spot the pattern. Then another week to verify it through secondary sources. Gregor looked at Dalton. Dalton looked at the floor. Why is Grandstone's legal team saying the numbers don't match what was presented today? Gregor asked. Dalton's jaw tightened. There may have been some adjustments for presentation purposes to make the opportunity clearer to investors. Adjustments, Gregor repeated. The words sat there between them, heavy. The core analysis was solid, Dalton said. I just highlighted the positive aspects. That's standard practice. You know that. Hiding liabilities isn't highlighting positives, Gregor said. That's fraud. The word hung in the air. Dalton's face went pale. That's not what I didn't hide anything. I just presented the most investor-friendly version of the data. The most investor-friendly version, Gregor said slowly, of Iris's analysis. Dalton didn't respond. Gregor turned to me. Did you send your original analysis to anyone outside the firm? This was the moment. The question I'd known was coming. I could lie, probably should lie, but lying wasn't why I'd done this. Mr. Briggs contacted me 2 weeks ago, I said. Asked for my opinion on working with Dalton. After today's presentation, I felt obligated to share accurate information. He's making a $2 billion decision. He deserved to know the real numbers. The room went very quiet. Dalton found his voice first. You went behind my back? You undermined this entire deal? I shared accurate research, I said. The research you asked me to do. The research you then changed to make it sound better than it was. You had no authority to contact him directly. You had no authority to present my work as yours. Dalton stepped toward me, not threatening, but aggressive enough that Gregor moved between us. Enough, Gregor said. Dalton, go back to your space. I need to handle this. Handle this? She just destroyed a $2 billion merger. A merger built on falsified projections, Gregor said. Using research she did that you took credit for. Go, now. Dalton left. I could hear him on his phone before he even reached his workspace, voice rising, trying to do damage control with someone. Gregor sat down in the chair beside my workspace, looked at me for a long moment. How long has this been going on? He asked quietly. The Grandstone analysis? 3 months. No, him taking credit for your work. I considered that, since he started, but it got worse with Grandstone. Before that, it was smaller things. Ideas I'd mentioned that would show up in his presentations. Insights I'd shared that became his observations. I thought maybe that was just how teams worked. Everyone contributes. The senior person presents. That's how teams work when the senior person acknowledges the team, Gregor said. What he's doing is theft. He called me a secretary, I said. The words came out quieter than I intended. In front of everyone. Said I just handle scheduling and pull files. Like the last 8 years didn't matter. Like I was invisible. Gregor nodded slowly. I should have warned you. When Dalton came here, I heard rumors from his last place. That he was good at taking credit. I thought maybe it was just office politics. People being petty. I didn't realize that he'd do it to me. That he'd be stupid enough to do it with work this significant. Gregor finished. And careless enough to falsify the data on top of it. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it. Grandstone's board is convening an emergency session. They want to talk to whoever did the original analysis. That would be me, I said. Yes, Gregor said. He stood up. I need to make some calls. Don't go anywhere. I wasn't planning to. Where would I go? I just imploded a $2 billion deal and exposed my superior as a fraud. Not exactly a situation you walk away from. 20 minutes later, Gregor came back. Keller Briggs wants to speak with you. Video call, 5 minutes. My stomach did something complicated. What should I say? The truth, Gregor said simply. That's all you've been saying. Don't stop now. The call connected. Keller Briggs appeared on my laptop screen. He was older than I'd imagined, maybe 60, with gray hair and sharp eyes that suggested he didn't miss much. Iris, he said. Thank you for taking this call. Of course, Mr. Briggs. I've been reading your analysis, the real one. It's impressive work, extraordinarily thorough. Thank you. It's also devastating. If even half of what you found is accurate, this acquisition would have bankrupted my company within 2 years. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said nothing. I need to know, Keller continued, why you sent this to me, after the presentation was already done, after your firm had already committed to this deal. Because the numbers were wrong, I said. The version presented today wasn't accurate. The liabilities are substantially higher than what was discussed. The restructuring costs are nearly double what was projected, and the timeline for profitability is off by at least 18 months, maybe more. And you felt obligated to tell me this. Yes, even though it would end the deal. The deal should end, I said. Based on real information, it's a bad acquisition. You'd be buying problems you can't afford to fix. Keller was quiet for a moment. Your colleague Dalton called me 15 minutes ago, said you were disgruntled, that you'd falsified some of the research to make him look bad. Something cold settled in my chest. I didn't falsify anything. I know. I had my team start verifying your sources while we've been talking. Everything checks out. In fact, you found issues our own analysts missed. He leaned forward slightly. Tell me something. How long have you been doing this kind of analysis? 8 years, but not officially. I assist with research and preparation. You do more than assist, from what I can see. This is senior analyst work, possibly better. I enjoy the work, I said carefully, but not the recognition. Apparently not. Keller smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. Dalton did something similar at his last firm, took credit for a junior analyst's work on a deal. We didn't find out until after he'd left. By then it didn't matter. This time, it matters. He paused. My board is voting to terminate all discussions with your firm. Not because of you, because we can't trust information coming from people who falsify projections and steal credit. But I want you to know something. The work you did, that level of analysis, I need people who can do that. I appreciate that, I said. I'm serious. When this settles, call me. We should talk about what real opportunities look like. The call ended. I sat there, staring at the blank screen, trying to process what had just happened. Gregor appeared in the doorway. Grandstone's pulling out, completely. They're also filing a complaint with the industry board about Dalton's conduct. I know. You just tanked a $2 billion merger, Gregor said. I know, I repeated. Good, he said, because it needed to be tanked. I looked up at him, surprised. I read your full analysis while you were on that call, Gregor continued. The real one. Iris, this deal would have ruined both companies. Grandstone would have collapsed under the debt, and we would have been liable for providing fraudulent projections. You didn't just save Keller's company. You saved ours. I didn't do it to save anyone, I said honestly. I did it because he called me a secretary, and because I was tired of being invisible. Well, Gregor said, you're not invisible anymore. He was right about that. By the end of the day, everyone in the firm knew what had happened, knew that I'd contacted Grandstone directly, knew that I'd exposed Dalton's falsified projections, knew that a massive deal had died because of it. The reactions were mixed. Some people looked at me with respect, others with suspicion, a few with outright hostility. Dalton didn't look at me at all. He'd been called into a meeting with the senior partners an hour after my call with Keller. Hadn't come out yet. I packed my bag at 6. Same time as always, like it was a normal day. It wasn't a normal day. As I walked toward the elevators, I passed the presentation room, still set up from this morning. The projection still showing the final slide from Dalton's presentation. His name in the corner, his contact information at the bottom, just a secretary. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside. Tomorrow would bring consequences. I knew that. But tonight, riding down 40 floors to the ground level, I felt something I hadn't felt in 8 years. I felt seen. The next morning, I arrived at 7:30. Same as always. Made tea in the small kitchen area while the sunrise painted the windows gold. By 8, 3 people had already stopped by my workspace. 2 from legal, 1 from HR. Just routine questions, the HR woman said. Her name was Philippa. I'd helped her daughter get an internship last year. She looked uncomfortable now, about the Grandstone situation. Of course, I said. We went to a small meeting space. Nothing intimidating, just questions. When had I first contacted Keller? What had I shared? Had I taken any proprietary information outside the firm? I answered everything honestly, showed them the messages, explained my reasoning. You understand this is highly unusual, Philippa said, contacting a client directly, sharing internal analysis without authorization. I understand. You could have come to Gregor first, or to senior management. I could have, I agreed. But by then, the presentation was done. The damage was happening in real time. Keller needed to know before he signed anything. So you took it upon yourself to decide what information he should have. No, I said. I gave him the information he should have received in the first place. The accurate information. Before someone convinced him to spend $2 billion on a disaster. Philippa made notes, asked a few more questions, then said I could go. I went back to my workspace, tried to focus on regular tasks. Couldn't. At 9:45, Dalton walked past, moving quickly, carrying a single box. His face was blank, empty. He didn't look at anyone. Someone whispered, "Did he just get fired?" Gregor appeared 20 minutes later. "Can we talk?" We went to his workspace. Actual workspace now, not the previous partner suite. He'd turned down the bigger space when they'd promoted him. Said he liked being close to the team. "Dalton's gone," Gregor said without preamble. Effective immediately. The senior partners reviewed everything last night, found 3 other deals where he'd done similar things. Taken credit for other people's work, exaggerated projections, cut corners on verification. I absorbed that. 3 others. At least 3. Possibly more. They're still investigating. He leaned back. The Grandstone situation forced them to look closely. They didn't like what they found. And me, you're not fired, if that's what you're asking. But there are concerns about protocol, about chain of command, about going outside the firm. I understand. Do you? Gregor asked. Because I need to know if you actually regret what you did, or if you'd do it again. I thought about that, really thought about it. I regret how it happened, the timing, the chaos, but the core decision, telling Keller the truth? No, I don't regret that. Gregor nodded slowly. That's what I thought. And honestly, it's the answer I wanted to hear. He pulled out a folder. The partners want to restructure how we handle research and analysis. They realized we've been wasting talent. People who understand the work but don't have traditional credentials or titles. People like you. What does that mean? It means they're creating an official analyst position, full role, proper title, fair compensation, and they want to offer it to you. I stared at him. You're serious? Completely. You've been doing this work for years. It's time we acknowledged that. Time we paid you for it. Time your name went on the analysis you produce. What if I say no? Then you say no, but I hope you won't. He slid the folder across. Look it over. Think about it. Let me know by Friday. I took the folder. Why are they doing this? After I just destroyed a huge deal. You didn't destroy it. You exposed it. There's a difference. And because Keller called me this morning, said he's considering future projects with us. But only if you're the one handling the analysis. He trusts you. That trust is worth more than any single deal. After Gregor left, I opened the folder. Read through the offer. The title, Strategic Analyst. The salary, triple what I'd been making. The responsibilities, exactly what I'd been doing unofficially for years. At the bottom, a note in Gregor's handwriting. You earned this 10 times over. Stop hiding your light. I sat there for a long time, holding that folder. 3 days later, I signed the papers. Became officially what I'd been unofficially for 8 years. The transition was strange. Same workspace, same colleagues, but different reactions. Some people congratulated me warmly. Others seemed confused. Like they couldn't quite reconcile the person who'd answered phones with the person now analyzing multi-million-dollar deals. One senior analyst, a woman named Gretchen, who'd always been pleasant but distant, stopped by my workspace. I owe you an apology, she said. I looked up, surprised. For not seeing you. I've worked here 6 years, walked past you hundreds of times, never once thought to ask what you actually did, what you were capable of. I just assumed that I was just support staff. Yes, and I'm sorry. That was lazy of me. And unfair. Thank you, I said. That means something. She nodded. For what it's worth, what you did with Dalton took guts. A lot of people here knew he was taking credit for other people's ideas. Nobody said anything. You did. After she left, I thought about that, about how many people had known, had seen, had said nothing. Being invisible had protected me in some ways. Let me learn without pressure. Let me build skills without scrutiny. But it had also trapped me, made me easy to exploit, easy to dismiss. Just a secretary. I wasn't invisible anymore. And that brought its own challenges. 2 weeks after accepting the new position, I got a call from Keller Briggs. I meant what I said, about talking when things settled. Are you interested? In what specifically? Working with us, leading our acquisition analysis team, building something from the ground up. It was tempting, really tempting. I just accepted a promotion here. I know, Gregor told me. I'm glad they finally recognized what they had. But if you ever want something different, the offer stands. We need people who tell the truth, even when it's inconvenient. I'll remember that. Good. And Iris? Thank you for what you did. My board ran their own analysis after you sent that information. You were right about everything. The hidden liabilities, the restructuring costs, all of it. If we'd gone through with that acquisition, it would have destroyed us. I'm glad I could help. You did more than help. You saved us. After we hung up, I sat with that for a while. Saved them. By telling the truth. By refusing to stay quiet when quiet was easier. I heard later, through professional networks, that Dalton tried to get hired at 2 other firms. Both turned him down. Word had spread about the falsified projections, about taking credit for other people's work, about what happened at Grandstone. Reputations in this industry are built slowly and destroyed quickly. He'd destroyed his. Part of me felt bad about that. Small part, the part that remembered him being pleasant those first few weeks. Before I understood what he was doing, but mostly I felt nothing. He'd made his choices, stolen credit he hadn't earned, falsified information that could have ruined people, and he'd called me a secretary, like it was an insult, like I was beneath notice. He'd been wrong about that. 6 months passed. I settled into my new role, started leading projects officially instead of ghostwriting them for other people. My name appeared on analysis reports. Clients started requesting me specifically. It felt good, strange, but good. One afternoon, I was working on a potential acquisition in the manufacturing sector when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Is this Iris? A woman's voice. Young, nervous. Yes. Who's this? My name is Rowan. I work at Hartfield Group. I heard about what happened with you and Dalton, about the Grandstone deal. Okay, I said carefully. My boss is doing the same thing, taking my analysis, presenting it as his own. I've been here 2 years and I'm so tired of being invisible, but I don't know what to do. Everyone says that's just how it works, that you pay your dues and eventually you get recognized. I closed my laptop. Where are you right now? At a cafe near my work, on my lunch break. Do you have evidence? Documentation showing what you've actually done? Yes. I keep copies of everything. My supervisor taught me that. She said, always protect yourself. Smart supervisor. Listen to her. I paused. What you're describing isn't paying dues. It's exploitation. And it doesn't get better by waiting. It gets better by forcing it into the light. But how? I can't just expose him. I'll lose my job. Maybe. Or maybe you'll gain your career. I can't tell you what to do, but I can tell you what I learned. Being underestimated only works as a weapon if you're willing to use it. And using it means risking everything. She was quiet for a moment. Was it worth it? What you did. I looked around my workspace. At my name on the door. At the analysis I was doing openly, with full credit. At the career I'd built from nothing, despite everyone assuming I was just furniture. Yes, I said. It was worth it. We talked for another 20 minutes. I didn't tell her what to do, just shared what I'd learned, how I'd documented everything, how I'd built relationships outside my immediate superior, how I'd finally stopped waiting for someone to notice me and forced them to see. After we hung up, I thought about all the people like us, doing the real work while someone else took the applause, staying quiet because speaking up felt too dangerous. I thought about Dalton, wherever he was now, probably still blaming me for his failures instead of his own choices. And I thought about Keller's offer, still open, still waiting. I wasn't ready to leave yet, still had work to do here, credibility to build, a career to establish on my own terms. But someday, maybe, someday I'd build something from the ground up, somewhere people got credit for the work they actually did, somewhere being smart mattered more than being charming, somewhere secretaries were recognized as the analysts they'd always been, just not today. Today, I had an acquisition to evaluate, with my name on it, my analysis, my reputation. Just a secretary, Dalton had said. He'd been right about one thing. I was just a secretary, until I decided I was something more. And then, nothing could stop me. Before I close this out, I want to say thank you for listening all the way through. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think about the invisible people doing real work everywhere, do me a favor, hit that like button. Leave a comment telling me where you're from and if you've ever felt overlooked like this. And subscribe, because there are more stories like this one. Stories about people who refused to stay quiet, who fought back smart instead of loud, who won not by playing the game, but by changing the rules entirely. Your support makes these stories possible. Thank you for being here. We can't use this report, my supervisor said, throwing my analysis onto his desk. It's too detailed, way too detailed. He ran his fingers through his thinning hair, exasperation painting his features. Nobody wants to read 64 pages analyzing transaction patterns. Vera, the chief needs something he can understand in 5 minutes. I stood there, my hands trembling slightly as I watched 3 weeks of sleepless nights dismissed with a casual flick of his wrist. The report represented the most thorough financial crimes analysis I'd ever produced. But Paul, these pension fund discrepancies show a clear internal pattern. If you just look at page 37, Stop, Paul held up his hand. We're pursuing the external breach angle. That's what everyone expects. That's what makes sense. He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing. You're still new to how things work here. Sometimes being too thorough just muddies the water. His words hit like a physical weight on my chest. I'd traced millions in missing city worker pension funds to a series of perfectly timed administrative approvals. Approvals that coincidentally benefited people in our own department. This report makes it look like we're accusing our colleagues, Paul continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Do you understand how that would play out? How it would reflect on this department? On me? I swallowed hard. But what if? That's enough, Vera. He slid my report into his drawer rather than the trash bin. Somehow worse. Knowing it would be buried rather than discarded outright. Stick to the assigned angle. Rewrite this focusing only on the external server vulnerabilities. 20 pages max. Use bullet points. As I turned to leave, he added, Oh, and clear your schedule for the Davis testimonial on Thursday. I'll need you to take notes while I conduct the interview. The Davis testimonial. My investigation had flagged Edward Davis as a key witness 3 weeks ago, but Paul had repeatedly delayed interviewing him. Now he was swooping in to conduct it himself. I returned to my cramped cubicle, the fluorescent lighting buzzing above as I slumped into my chair. 2 years of being the invisible analyst in the city's financial crimes unit, and nothing had changed. My insights were consistently repackaged, simplified beyond recognition, or outright ignored. My desk phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. Financial crimes? Vera speaking. Ms. Kelman, this is Chief Amara's office. The crisp, efficient voice belonged to the department chief's assistant. The chief requests your presence immediately in conference room A. My presence? Are you sure? Yes. Bring all materials related to the pension fund investigation. The chief specifically asked for you by name. The line went dead before I could ask any further questions. My heart hammered against my ribs as I gathered my files, including a backup copy of my complete report. Walking into conference room A, I immediately sensed the tension. The entire financial oversight committee sat around the table, expressions grim. Paul stood awkwardly in the corner, his usual confident posture replaced by something stiffer, uncertain. Chief Amara, a commanding woman who'd risen through the ranks despite the department's notorious boys' club atmosphere, nodded at me. Miss Kelman, please sit. As I took my seat, she slid a folder across the table, pages from my original report. Someone anonymously delivered key sections of your analysis directly to the mayor's office this morning, she explained, her voice even. These allegations about internal manipulation of the pension funds, can you substantiate every claim in here? Before I could answer, Paul stepped forward. Chief, Vera is relatively inexperienced and tends to overcomplicate. It's on the Civas. I didn't ask you, Paul. Chief Amara cut him off sharply. In fact, your presence here is merely courtesy before you're placed on administrative leave pending review. The room fell silent. Paul's face drained of color. The chief turned back to me. Well, Ms. Kelman, I took a deep breath. Yes, I can substantiate everything. I have the complete documentation, transaction histories, approval records, and timeline analyses. Then effective immediately. You'll lead this investigation under my direct supervision. Wait, did I just hear that correctly? I struggled to keep my expression neutral as Paul's jaw literally dropped. If you're as shocked as Paul right now, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about professional underdogs turning the tables. Comment below if you've ever had your hard work dismissed by someone who should have appreciated it. My name is Vera Kelman, and until that moment in conference room A, I'd been the anonymous number cruncher who received neither credit nor acknowledgement. At 32, I'd spent my career being told I was too meticulous, unnecessarily detailed, and, my personal favorite, lacking big-picture perspective. The truth? I see patterns where others see random data. My mind naturally connects dots across seemingly unrelated transactions. It's not a skill I developed, it's how my brain has always worked. My parents recognized it early. As a child, I'd reorganize my books by subtle color gradients rather than alphabetically. I'd create elaborate systems for my toys based on characteristics nobody else considered important. My father, a high school mathematics teacher, nurtured this tendency. My mother, who worked in banking, showed me how to apply it to financial systems. I joined the city's financial crimes unit with idealistic visions of using my natural abilities to protect people from sophisticated schemes. Instead, I found myself relegated to background research, while men with half my analytical skills presented watered-down versions of my findings. Paul Renner had been my supervisor for all 2 years of my employment. He'd built his career by simplifying complex financial analyses into digestible snippets for higher-ups. What he actually did was strip away critical nuance and context, presenting oversimplified conclusions that aligned with expectations rather than evidence. The pension fund case was supposed to be my breakthrough. Thousands of city workers, teachers, maintenance workers, public health nurses had discovered their retirement accounts mysteriously depleted. The official story pointed to external hackers. My analysis suggested otherwise. As I walked back to my cubicle after the meeting with Chief Amara, whispers followed me. Overnight, I'd transformed from invisible analyst to lead investigator on the department's most high-profile case. My small desk suddenly seemed inadequate for the task ahead. I requested a temporary workspace, and by afternoon, I was setting up in a small conference room dedicated to the investigation. I pinned timeline charts to the walls, spread transaction records across the table, and began rebuilding the case properly. With official authority now, I could request original documents rather than working from copies and fragments. Kelman, a voice interrupted my concentration. I turned to find Detective Ash leaning against the doorframe. Nolan Ash had been with the department for 15 years and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who belonged anywhere he stood. "Detective," I nodded, unsure why he'd sought me out. "Heard your running point on the pension case now." He studied the papers spreading across my workspace. "Quite the promotion." Did you need something?" I asked, protective of my newly granted authority. He smiled slightly. "Actually, I came to offer help. I interviewed 3 of the administrators when this first broke. Something felt off, but I couldn't place it. Maybe a detailed approach might find what I missed." The way he said detailed lacked Paul's usual condescension. I gestured to an empty chair. "I'd appreciate your perspective. I'd appreciate your perspective." For the next hour, Detective Ash walked me through his initial interviews, describing not just what was said but behavioral nuances my data couldn't capture. Nervous tics, inconsistent eye contact, particular phrases repeated under pressure. "Why are you helping me?" I finally asked. He leaned back, considering. "My mother lost 30% of her pension in this mess. 30 years as a city librarian, and now she's taking a part-time job at 71. His jaw tightened. "Also, Paul Renner is an obstructive, credit-stealing bureaucrat who's been burying good work for years. You notice that?" Everyone with functioning eyes noticed that, Kelman. He stood to leave. "Check the April 7th transaction batch. Something happened that day that nobody wants to talk about." As Detective Ash left, another figure appeared in the doorway. Paula Davis, a senior analyst who'd always been cordial but distant. "Vera," she said quietly, glancing over her shoulder before entering. "I need to show you something, but not here. Can you meet me after hours?" The seriousness in her expression sent a chill through me. "Where?" "The coffee shop across from the library. 7 o'clock. She slipped away before I could question her further. By 6:30 that evening, my initial excitement had morphed into unease. The more I examined the records, the more deliberate the pattern of theft appeared. This wasn't opportunistic crime. It was calculated, systematic draining of funds through administrative processes designed to avoid detection. And at the center of several key approvals was a name that made my stomach clench. Retired investigator Thomas Weldon, Paul's mentor and weekly golf partner. The coffee shop was nearly empty when I arrived. Paula sat in the far corner, a manila envelope on the table before her. She'd been with the department for 15 years and had a reputation for keeping her head down and her opinions to herself. "I shouldn't be doing this," she said as I sat down, "but I can't sleep at night anymore." She slid the envelope toward me. Inside were printed copies of emails, correspondence between Paul, Thomas Weldon, and several city administrators. "How did you get these?" I asked, scanning the damning contents. They discussed adjustments to the pension fund, reallocation strategies, and most disturbingly, containment of potential whistleblowers. I was copied on one by mistake 2 years ago. After that, I created a filter to capture anything with similar phrasing. Paula's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her coffee cup. "They've been siphoning money systematically for at least 5 years. Small amounts from thousands of accounts, adding up to millions. Why didn't you report this?" Her eyes met mine, filled with shame and fear. The last person who questioned similar discrepancies was found with illegal material on their work computer. They swore they were framed. Nobody believed them. I slid the envelope into my bag, my mind racing. Thank you for this. I'll protect your involvement. Be careful, Vera, Paula whispered. They've been getting away with this for years because they're willing to do whatever it takes to keep it hidden. As I walked to my car, the weight of what I'd uncovered pressed down on me. This wasn't just about missing money anymore. It was about corruption at the core of the very department tasked with preventing financial crimes. My apartment became an extension of my workspace. Each night, I pieced together fragments, connecting Paula's emails with transaction records and approval documents. I created a comprehensive timeline showing how the pension funds had been systematically drained through seemingly legitimate administrative processes. Every morning, I arrived at work expecting to be stopped, to find my access revoked or my investigation reassigned. But Chief Amara proved to be a powerful shield. When records I requested were mysteriously delayed, she personally intervened. When witnesses suddenly became unavailable, she made them available again. 1 week into my investigation, I received my first direct threat. It was a blank envelope slipped under my apartment door. Inside, a single photograph of me entering Paula's building the previous night, clearly taken from a parked car. Scrawled across the back, team players keep their benefits. The implied threat sent ice through my veins. How had they known about the meeting? Who was watching me? I considered calling Chief Amara, but hesitated. What if her phone was monitored? What if she wasn't truly the ally I believed her to be? I tucked the photograph into my evidence file and doubled my vigilance. That morning, I altered my routine, taking an indirect route to work and watching for vehicles that might be following me. The investigation room felt different when I arrived, subtly disturbed, though nothing was obviously missing. My instinct said someone had been through my materials. I began keeping critical documents with me at all times, and creating decoy files with slightly altered information. Detective Ash appeared in my doorway around noon. "You look like someone who found something they wish they hadn't," he observed. I considered my options, then showed him the photograph. His expression hardened. "This crosses a line. I'm putting a patrol car near your place tonight." "That might make it worse," I argued. "I need to appear unfazed." "Then at least take this." He handed me a small recording device disguised as a keychain. "Keep it with you. Record everything." As days passed, the obstacles multiplied. Critical transaction histories became corrupted in the system. Key witnesses suddenly changed their statements or claimed memory lapses. The retired investigator's financial records were declared classified by someone in administrative services. I compiled a list of everyone who had both the authority and opportunity to interfere with my investigation. The pattern was clear. They all connected back to a small group centered around Thomas Weldon, with Paul as his primary facilitator. 2 weeks into my investigation, I discovered something that made the stakes painfully personal. Digging through beneficiary lists, I found my own mother's name. As a former City Parks Department employee, her modest pension had been reduced by nearly 20%, money she counted on for her heart medication. That night, I worked until my eyes burned, tracing the approval chain that had specifically targeted her account. The signature authorizing the reallocation belonged to Paul himself. The next morning, Paula was waiting by my car when I left my apartment. "They're cleaning house," she whispered, her face pale. "3 people have been encouraged to retire since yesterday. All people who had access to the April records you've been requesting." "Do they know about you?" I asked. "I don't think so." "Not yet." She pressed a USB drive into my hand. "I made copies of everything I could access before they lock me out too. There's something else. They've scheduled an emergency oversight committee meeting for tomorrow. Word is they're planning to announce a resolution to the case." "That's impossible. We're nowhere near." "They're going to blame it on a deceased IT administrator who can't defend himself. They've been building the paper trail for days." After Paula left, I sat in my car, the USB drive heavy in my palm. They were accelerating their cover-up. I needed to move faster. At work, the atmosphere had shifted perceptibly. Colleagues, who had begun tentatively speaking to me, now avoided eye contact. As I walked to my temporary investigation room, I overheard snippets of conversation that stopped abruptly when I appeared. The door to my workspace was locked. Strange, since I'd never locked it. Inside, Chief Amara was waiting, her expression unreadable. "Ms. Kelman," she said formally, "I've been reviewing your progress on this investigation." My pulse quickened. "I've made significant headway, despite numerous obstacles. If I could just, Tim, the Oversight Committee has concerns about your approach. She remained standing, maintaining the power dynamic. They feel the investigation has become unfocused. Unfocused? I repeated, disbelieving. I've uncovered direct links between internal approvals and missing funds. I've seen your files. Chief Amara's voice remained even. The committee believes you're pursuing an unnecessarily complex theory when simpler explanations exist. The betrayal stung worse than anything Paul had ever done. I had believed Chief Amara was different, that she wanted the truth. Now she stood before me, using the same dismissive language, the same coded message. Stop looking where you're not supposed to look. You're taking me off the case, I stated flatly. Not exactly. She handed me a folder. The department physician has recommended you take administrative leave for stress-related concerns. 2 weeks, fully paid. I never saw any physician. The recommendation is based on observation of your recent behavior, working excessive hours, displaying paranoid tendencies, making accusations against senior staff. I opened the folder. The medical recommendation was dated the previous day, signed by a doctor I'd never met. This is fabricated, I said quietly. Chief Amara's expression flickered. 2. With guilt? Regret? The decision has been made, Miss Kelman. Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. As she turned to leave, I asked, what changed? You seemed committed to finding the truth, no matter where it led. She paused at the door. Sometimes the clearest path forward requires compromise. By noon, I had been effectively removed from the department. My building access was revoked, my case files confiscated, and my investigation officially reassigned to a senior analyst known for his cursory reviews and rapid case closures. Rain tapped against my apartment windows that evening as I spread Paula's copied files across my living room floor. The USB drive contained more than I'd expected. Internal emails, transaction approvals, meeting minutes marked confidential. Detective Ash called around midnight. They're moving fast, he said without preamble. Tomorrow's oversight meeting has been closed to general staff. They're announcing a resolution to the case, blaming a systems administrator who died last year. Harold Kim, I supplied. I saw the files they're fabricating. You need to lay low, Kelman. This goes higher than Paul or even Weldon. The mayor's office is involved now. The mayor? Why would he? Then it clicked. The investment firm. The one that manages the city's reallocated funds. Bingo. The mayor's brother-in-law sits on their board. This isn't just about stealing pension money. It's about where that money went afterward. After we hung up, I stared at the scattered evidence surrounding me. They had taken my official authority, my access, and my platform. By tomorrow, they would announce their fabricated resolution, and the case would be officially closed. I had been naive to think that simply being right would be enough. Around 3 a.m., as rain continued to drum against my windows, I made a decision. They had taken everything from me except my analytical mind, the very thing they had always dismissed as too thorough and too detailed. I would use it against them. For the next 2 days, I barely slept. I transformed my living room into an analysis center, connecting dots across thousands of transactions. I created a simplified presentation, just 5 slides. No jargon, no complex traces, just crystal clear connections between the missing millions and specific decisions approved by Paul, Weldon, and their associates. The beauty of it was that I included only irrefutable public information anyone could verify. Every document I referenced was publicly available in city records, if you knew exactly where to look. On day 3, I pulled up the city council's public meeting schedule. As a city employee, technically still employed while on administrative leave, I had the right to request a 3-minute public comment slot at the upcoming council meeting. I submitted my request through the online portal, listing my topic simply as pension fund management concerns. The day of the council meeting arrived. I dressed professionally, packed my simple presentation slides, and arrived early. Paul was there in the audience, smirking when he saw me approach the sign-in table. He clearly believed I was making a futile, desperate move. When my name was called, I walked calmly to the podium with only my 5 slides and a few index cards. The council members looked bored already. They'd been listening to public comments for over an hour. My name is Vera Kelman, I began. I'm a financial analyst with the city's Financial Crimes Unit, currently on administrative leave. The pension fund investigation has officially been closed, with blame assigned to a deceased IT administrator. but I've prepared a very brief explanation that demonstrates why that conclusion is impossible. Paul's smirk faltered slightly. From the corner of my eye, I noticed Chief Amara slip into the back of the room, her expression tense. I displayed my first slide, a simple timeline showing 5 key dates when pension funds were reallocated. On these dates, significant pension funds were moved through a specific approval process. Each movement required 3 separate authorizations. I advanced to the next slide, showing the authorization chain. These signatures appear on all 5 major transactions. The council chambers had grown quieter. Several council members leaned forward, their attention captured by the simplicity of my presentation. The official explanation claims Harold Kim, who died last year, manipulated these transfers. However, I advanced to the 3rd slide, showing dates of employment and system access records. Mr. Kim did not have access to 2 of the required authorization systems and was on documented medical leave during 3 of these 5 dates. Paul was no longer smirking. He had pulled out his phone and appeared to be texting frantically. More importantly, I continued, advancing to my 4th slide, each of these transfers was subsequently invested through Highland Investment Partners. I paused, letting the name register. A firm where Mayor Wilson's brother-in-law serves as investment director. A murmur swept through the chamber. Mayor Wilson, seated at the center of the council, had gone completely still. My final slide showed the full circle, pension funds moving from city workers' accounts through the approval process and ultimately generating management fees for Highland Partners. I have prepared a complete dossier with all supporting documentation, drawn entirely from public records. Copies have been delivered to the State Attorney General's office, the FBI Public Corruption Division, and 5 journalists from different news organizations. This last part was a bluff. I had prepared the dossiers but hadn't delivered them yet. I'm happy to answer any questions from the council. The chamber erupted in confused discussion. Mayor Wilson called for order, his face ashen. From the back of the room, I saw Chief Amara quietly slip out the door. Council President Odom leaned into his microphone. Ms. Kelman, these are extremely serious allegations. Do you understand the implications of what you're presenting in a public forum? I do, sir. That's why I've relied solely on verifiable public records for this presentation. Paul was now standing, attempting to catch the council president's attention, but he was ignored as Odom continued. I move that we immediately convene a special investigation committee with Ms. Kelman as a principal witness. The motion passed unanimously, even with Mayor Wilson's visibly reluctant vote. As I gathered my materials, I felt someone approach from behind. Turning, I found Detective Ash standing there. That, he said quietly, was either the bravest or most reckless thing I've ever witnessed. Possibly both, I admitted, my hands finally beginning to shake now that it was over. They'll come after you hard now, he warned. You've backed them into a corner publicly. Dangerous people don't just surrender when exposed. I know. I tucked my presentation materials into my bag. That's why this is just the beginning. As we walked out of the council chambers, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Check your email. You have allies where you least expect them. The message could be a trap, another attempt to discredit me, or it could be genuine support from someone still inside the department. Either way, I had crossed a line from which there was no returning. The real battle was just beginning. The next 48 hours passed in a blur of depositions, emergency meetings, and constant vigilance. I barely slept, alternating between answering questions from hastily assembled investigative committees and checking my surroundings for potential threats. The email mentioned in the mysterious text contained internal communications showing that Chief Amara had been pressured into removing me from the case. More importantly, it revealed the existence of a secret backup server where all the corrupted transaction records were still intact, preserved by an IT specialist who had grown suspicious of repeated requests to delete specific data. While the public firestorm grew, I received an unexpected call from Paula. You actually did it, she said, her voice a mixture of awe and terror. The whole department is in chaos. Paul hasn't shown up for 2 days. Thomas Weldon was photographed entering the federal building this morning. Are you safe? I asked. For now, she hesitated. There's something else. Someone left an unmarked envelope on my desk this morning. Inside was a key card for the records archive and a note saying, Sub-Basement C, Row 47. The records archive was a vast underground storage facility beneath City Hall where physical documents were kept. Sub-basement C housed the oldest, rarely accessed files. "Can you get it to me?" I asked. 3 hours later, I was using the borrowed keycard to enter the dimly lit archive. The musty smell of old paper filled the air as I navigated through towering shelves of boxed records. Row 47 contained financial documentation from 8 years earlier. A.S. year, the year Thomas Weldon had retired, and Paul had been promoted to supervisor. The box I sought was unmarked except for a date range. Inside, buried beneath mundane budget reports, I found what someone had wanted me to discover: a handwritten ledger tracking special allocations dating back nearly a decade. Names, dates, amounts, all meticulously recorded in what I recognized as Thomas Weldon's distinctive handwriting. This wasn't just about pension funds. The scheme had begun with smaller, targeted thefts from various city accounts, gradually expanding as they gained confidence. My mother's pension reduction hadn't been random. Her name appeared alongside dozens of others with a notation: previous department whistleblowers, troublemakers. They had been systematically punishing anyone who had ever questioned authority or reported improprieties, while rewarding those who looked the other way. I photographed every page before carefully returning the ledger. As I exited the archive, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Mayor Wilson announces temporary leave of absence amid financial investigation. Things were moving faster than I'd anticipated. The exposed threads were unraveling quickly, with officials scrambling to distance themselves from the growing scandal. That evening, Detective Ash met me at a diner far from our usual locations. "The state attorney general has officially taken over the investigation," he informed me, sliding into the booth. "They've issued preservation orders for all financial records going back 10 years. That's good news, right?" His expression remained grim. Yes and no. The wider this gets, the more desperate certain people become. Paul's been located at his cabin upstate. Apparently, he's cooperating, claiming he was just following orders. "Typical," I muttered. "Here's what you don't know," Ash continued, lowering his voice. "Thomas Weldon hasn't just disappeared. He's actively trying to negotiate immunity in exchange for testimony against everyone else involved, including you." "Me? I wasn't involved." "He's claiming you knew about the scheme all along and only went public when you weren't given a larger cut." Ash's eyes met mine. "It's absurd, but he's desperate and connected. If he can create enough doubt about your credibility." I pushed my untouched coffee aside, suddenly nauseous. "He's trying to make me the scapegoat." "Exactly. They need someone to take the fall, and the whistleblower makes a convenient target. They're painting you as a disgruntled employee seeking revenge." "Which is partly true," I admitted. "I was disgruntled." "There's a difference between exposing corruption and committing it," Ash said firmly. "But perception matters. They're working to shape the narrative before all the evidence comes to light." The next morning, I woke to find my face plastered across local news outlets. "Questionable motives. Key whistleblower's history under scrutiny," read one headline. Another stated, "Sources question analysts' sudden discovery of long-running scheme." They were implementing a classic discreditation strategy, not denying the allegations outright, but questioning my motives and timing to cast doubt on everything I'd presented. My phone rang constantly with reporters seeking comments. I declined them all, following the Attorney General's advice to avoid public statements while the investigation proceeded. On day 5, after my counsel presentation, I received an official summons to appear before a special grand jury the following week. The same day, an anonymous envelope appeared in my mailbox containing copies of my personal bank statements with certain transactions circled in red, ordinary deposits like my paycheck and a birthday check from my mother, but presented to imply suspicious activity. The message was clear. They could fabricate evidence against me just as easily as I had exposed evidence against them. That night, alone in my apartment with the blinds drawn, I experienced my first moment of true doubt. Had I miscalculated? These were powerful people with resources and connections I couldn't match. They had decades of experience covering their tracks. What if they succeeded in turning this around on me? I was pulled from this spiral by an unexpected knock at my door. Peering through the peephole, I was shocked to see Chief Amara standing in the hallway. Cautiously, I opened the door. "Chief, may I come in?" she asked, her usual commanding presence somewhat diminished. She looked tired, her normally immaculate appearance slightly disheveled. I hesitated, then stepped aside. She entered, declining my offer of water or coffee. "I won't take much of your time." she said, remaining standing. I'm here because I owe you an explanation. For removing me from the case? For that and more. She squared her shoulders. When I first brought you onto the investigation, I genuinely believed we were seeking the truth. What I didn't know then was how extensive the corruption had become, or that my own supervisor was involved. The commissioner, I realized aloud. She nodded. 3 days into your investigation, he called me into his office. He had photos, my sister's drug rehab stint that we'd kept private, my mother's undocumented status. He made it clear, either I shut down your investigation or they would destroy my family. The admission hung in the air between us. Why are you telling me this now? I finally asked. Because tomorrow morning, I'm testifying before the Attorney General. I'm bringing everything I know, including the commissioner's threats. She met my eyes directly. I've already moved my family to a secure location. Whatever happens next, I need you to know I didn't betray you willingly. After she left, I sat in silence, processing this new information. Chief Amara's testimony would add crucial credibility to my evidence. The commissioner's involvement explained how they had been able to manipulate investigations for so long without detection. The next week passed in a whirlwind of depositions, evidence submissions, and security precautions. The investigation had expanded beyond the Financial Crimes Unit to include the mayor's office, the pension board, and several private investment firms. Paul had turned state's evidence, confirming much of what I'd uncovered while attempting to minimize his own role. Thomas Weldon remained elusive, his whereabouts unknown after his initial contact with federal authorities. The grand jury was scheduled to begin hearing comprehensive testimony in 2 days. I had been preparing extensively with prosecutors, organizing my evidence and practicing my explanations of complex financial maneuvers in simple, accessible terms. The evening before my testimony, I received a text from Detective Ash. Emergency. Meet at the second location. Now. We had established several meeting points for emergencies. The second location was a 24-hour laundromat with multiple exits. I found Ash waiting in his unmarked car across the street. He didn't speak until I was inside with the doors locked. Thomas Weldon resurfaced, he said grimly. He's scheduled to testify tomorrow, before you. What's he planning to say? My source couldn't get specifics, but Weldon spent 6 hours with his lawyers today. The rumor is he's prepared a comprehensive alternative narrative that acknowledges the scheme but redirects blame. My stomach tightened. Toward me. And others. Apparently, he's bringing documentation showing that several rogue employees orchestrated everything without his knowledge. That's absurd. His handwriting is all over the ledger I found, which hasn't been officially entered into evidence yet, Ash reminded me. You photographed it but left the original in place. If someone removed it since then, the realization hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so careful to preserve the evidence that I might have given them time to destroy it. We need to get back into that archive, I said. Impossible tonight. Security's been doubled around all city records since this broke. I pressed my fingers to my temples, thinking rapidly. There has to be something we're missing. Weldon wouldn't resurface unless he believed he had a way out. Or unless he's desperate, Ash suggested. His accounts have been frozen. His reputation is destroyed. This testimony might be his last attempt to salvage something. We spent hours strategizing, trying to anticipate Weldon's arguments and prepare counterpoints. By the time I returned home, it was past midnight. I fell into an uneasy sleep, waking repeatedly from dreams where I stood alone before a hostile jury, while Paul and Weldon pointed accusing fingers. Morning came too quickly. I dressed carefully in a conservative suit, reviewing my notes one final time before heading to the courthouse. News vans lined the street, reporters calling out questions as I made my way up the steps. Inside, I was directed to a waiting room where witnesses were sequestered before testimony. To my surprise, Paula was already there, looking nervous but determined. They called me to testify about the emails I saved, she explained. I couldn't stay silent anymore. Thank you, I said, genuinely moved by her courage. A court officer appeared at the door. Mr. Weldon will testify first, followed by Ms. Kelman. As Weldon passed me on his way into the grand jury room, he paused momentarily. His once commanding presence had diminished. He looked older, haunted, but his eyes held a disturbing confidence as they met mine. Nothing personal, he murmured before continuing through the door. For the next 3 hours, I waited, imagining what lies he might be spinning. When the door finally reopened, Weldon emerged, looking satisfied. He didn't glance in my direction as he was escorted out another exit. "Ms. Kelman," the court officer called. "They're ready for you." The grand jury room was imposing, 23 citizens seated in tiered rows, the prosecutors at a table to the side. I took my place at the witness stand, was sworn in, and waited for the questioning to begin. The lead prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman named Jessie Winters, approached. "Ms. Kelman, thank you for appearing today. Before we begin your planned testimony, I'd like to address some statements made by the previous witness." My heart raced. Here it came, Weldon's accusations, the alternative narrative, the attempt to make me the scapegoat. "Mr. Weldon has testified that you approached him approximately 2 years ago with concerns about pension fund discrepancies. Is this correct?" I blinked, confused by the question. "No, I never spoke directly with Mr. Weldon about any concerns." He further stated that you were systematically blocked from pursuing these concerns by your supervisor, Paul Renner, that your reports were consistently buried or altered. Is this accurate? "Yes, that part is true, but, Mr. Weldon claims that he retired because he was being pressured to participate in the scheme and refused. He states that he kept detailed records of all suspicious transactions and approvals as insurance, which he provided to you recently through an anonymous drop. Is any of this accurate?" Suddenly, I understood. Weldon hadn't accused me. He'd created a narrative where he was a fellow whistleblower, a behind-the-scenes ally who had been secretly documenting the corruption all along. It was breathtakingly audacious and completely false. "No," I stated firmly. "That is not what happened. Mr. Weldon was a principal architect of this scheme, not an opponent of it. The ledger I discovered was in his handwriting, documenting how funds were diverted, not exposing it. For the next 4 hours, I methodically dismantled Weldon's alternative narrative, presenting my evidence in the clear, detailed manner that had always been my strength. I explained complex financial mechanisms in accessible terms, connecting each piece of evidence to specific actions by specific individuals. When I finally emerged from the grand jury room, exhausted but relieved, Detective Ash was waiting. "How bad was it?" he asked. "Weldon tried to recast himself as a secret whistleblower," I explained. "Claimed he'd been documenting everything to expose it someday." Ash let out a low whistle. "Bold strategy. It might have worked if I hadn't been so." I paused, the irony suddenly striking me. So detailed in my analysis. My evidence timeline makes his story impossible. 6 weeks later, the grand jury returned indictments against 15 individuals, including Paul Renner, Thomas Weldon, former Mayor Wilson, and the pension board chairman. The charges ranged from fraud and embezzlement to obstruction of justice and witness tampering. Chief Amara, cleared of wrongdoing after her testimony about being coerced, implemented a department-wide reform of financial crimes investigations. Her first act was to create a new special analysis unit with complete investigative independence. "I'd like you to head it," she told me in her newly redecorated office. The previous commissioner's dark wood and leather replaced with modern, transparent glass. "Your approach, your thoroughness, is exactly what this department needs." I considered her offer. I'd want complete autonomy to pursue investigations wherever they lead. No simplified versions, no politically expedient conclusions. "That's precisely why I'm asking you," she replied. "Corruption thrives when we settle for simplified narratives. Your refusal to do so broke this case open." On my first day leading the new unit, I arrived early to set up my office. Through the glass walls, I watched as workers updated the department signage, adding Special Analysis Unit to the directory. My desk phone rang, my first official call in the new position. "Special Analysis Unit, Vera Kelman speaking." "Ms. Kelman," the voice belonged to the State Attorney General. "I wanted to personally inform you that Thomas Weldon's immunity request has been formally denied. His trial date is set for March. Thank you for letting me know. There's more. During preparation for trial, we discovered something you'll find interesting. Those pension reductions targeting troublemakers? The list was created before you joined the department, but your name was added to it 6 months ago, after your first detailed report questioning an internal approval process. After we hung up, I sat back in my chair, absorbing this information. They had targeted my mother to punish me for being too thorough, for seeing patterns they wanted to remain hidden. Later that afternoon, I walked past the holding cells where Paul waited for transport to the county jail. His eyes found mine through the bars. The arrogance that had defined him was gone, replaced by something hollow. I never thought you'd actually pursue it this far, he said quietly. It was supposed to be a simple operation. Skim a little from thousands of accounts. Spread the loss so widely nobody would notice or care enough to fight. That was your mistake, I replied, assuming that details don't matter, that people don't matter. For what it's worth, adding your mother to the list wasn't my idea. Weldon insisted, said we needed to teach you to simplify, to stop looking so closely. I considered this final irony, that their attempt to punish me for being too detailed had ultimately led to their exposure, that the very quality they had dismissed and denigrated had become their undoing. Goodbye, Paul, I said, turning away. As I walked back to my office, Detective Ash fell into step beside me. How does it feel? He asked. Finally seeing justice in motion? I thought about the question. The satisfaction was real, but different than I'd imagined. It wasn't about Paul's humiliation or Weldon's failed attempt to escape consequences. It wasn't even about my promotion or vindication. It feels like restoration, I finally answered. Not just for me, but for everyone they hurt. Every pension they reduced, every career they stunted, every truth they buried. 6 months later, I stood in the courtroom as the verdicts were read. Guilty on all counts for Thomas Weldon. Guilty on most counts for Paul and the others. Mandatory minimum sentences, ensuring they would spend years, not months, behind bars. The pension funds were being restored through seized assets and civil penalties. My mother had received a letter apologizing for the accounting error in her retirement benefits, along with full restitution plus interest. As I left the courthouse, a young analyst from the department approached me tentatively. Ms. Kelman, I just wanted to say, your case changed everything for people like me. They don't dismiss our detailed reports anymore. They actually listen now. Her words were the sweetest part of my revenge. Not the punishment of those who had wronged me, but the transformation of the system that had enabled them. The validation of thorough, detailed work that sees the full picture instead of the convenient one. My revenge wasn't in watching them fall. It was in building something better from the ruins of what they had corrupted. It was in knowing that the next person who noticed something wrong wouldn't be silenced or dismissed for being too thorough. Sometimes the best revenge isn't dramatic or loud. Sometimes it's simply creating a world where the truth, in all its detailed, complex glory, finally matters. If this story resonated with you, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Have you ever been told you were too much of something, too detailed, too passionate, too persistent, only to find that quality became your greatest strength? Share your experience in the comments below. Remember, what others dismiss as your weakness might actually be your superpower.